pledge. And so that kind of means we stand up and do the pledge. And Brad's going to lead. Sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome everybody. We had another one of our largest commendation ceremonies ever. At 5:30, went into open session, went into exec session, and now we're back in open session. And so students are taking notes. That's where we've been, and now we're in open session. And I haven't done it. So and there are no modifications to the agenda. Anyone? Staff? Anyone? Brad? No modifications. And so if there's not, and I'm just following my agenda. There's a public comment period, and I don't see that anyone has signed up, correct? And I'm just always happy to hear from anyone and everyone that's in the building, and which means that we always have a few students here, but we're going to listen to our student reps first, and obviously when other seniors in the room wish to chime in about their wonderful experiences at Ithaca High School or not, please do. But Ithaca High first, go ahead.
Awesome. So just some updates from the IHS Student Council. One of the big priorities this year is we want to have a spring pep rally. Additionally, they're trying to organize a carnival this year, and they're working with Link Crew, where each club will have its own booth that will be open to the community, basically. They're also working on having a 5K color run with cross country. Student Council has also voiced concerns about the number of plastic cups being used at the high school, and they suggest that we maybe use bottles instead of cups. They were also discussing having a Teacher of the Month program or segment that would be featured in the IHS calendar. They were also talking about increasing access to the printers at the school, and another common grievance is having to get a pass when you print, so they're working on solving that problem. Additionally, they would like to improve the silent zone in the library. As for other events, the IHS Brain Team Fall Tournament took place on November 10th, where International Club provided lunch, including an international tasting bar, and that was a great club collaboration. Senior Bowling Night, which is only open to seniors, not me sadly, will take place on November 16th. And the IHS Handball Tournament will take place on November 17th, which is open to all students. And also, IHS's first Voice and Choice for the Spring Musical will take place this Friday, where students will have the opportunity to vote for the Spring Musical. This year, the options are Little Shop of Horrors and Rent the School Edition.
So the high school's Molly UN Club had its first annual Hilton Conference in Rochester this past Friday and Saturday. And overall, it was a great success with many new delegates experiencing the debate of Molly UN. So the planning for the Social Justice Week, which will take place sometime next year, has begun. And the fall drama Teach Me How to Cry premiered this past weekend. So as for sports, the fall sports season has just wrapped up, and there were many achievements and accomplishments this season. So the girls' JV soccer team won the stack championships. Girls varsity soccer won sectionals and advanced to the state qualifiers for the first time in over a decade. Girls tennis won sectionals for the first time in 10 years. Girls swimming won sectionals many years in a row now. And varsity winter sports began last Monday.
Sandra?
And we have a member of that tennis team.
Absolutely. Congratulations. And there are no LACS kids here yet. I see there's empty seats. We good at Ithaca High? Anything else? Don't mind. So board responses, anyone?
All sounds good.
I will only add, I would vote for Little Shop, just.
I vote for Rent. I was going to say that because we did Little Shop about
When was it?
20 years ago.
Oh, Rent's still different now. Oh, sorry, we're not going to get, we don't need to get. So, do want to congratulate the fall sports athletes. We honored many of them today, Dr. Brown, correct? We honored many women athletes tonight, and so really outstanding job. A large number of women athletes taking advantage of the opportunity to do great things, and so congratulations to Asha and the whole group. I saw, not probably as many young men athletes as I might want to see. So the men have to pick it up a bit.
Football team did very well.
Oh, right. Now it's the world has flipped. It's jocks used to get a pass, and now it's the girls are smart. Now it's the world is stranger in a strange land. It's okay. So good. So if nothing else, we're going to move on to the consent, and then we'll get into.
I'll move the consent as presented.
Second.
Anything to speak to? Usual. Nothing outstanding. Okay. Move seconded by who's second? Chris, thank you, Chris. And all in favor? That is everyone. And so, Dr. Brown.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Davis, for this opportunity. Wish to invite Ms. Verba up. We wish to highlight some old news to make sure it's on folks' radar, and then share some new news with folks. One is, both are around the upcoming capital bond project that we are putting in front of voters.
So the update is that all of the planning has continued. There will be a Finance and Facilities Committee meeting next week, next Tuesday. We, meaning the district representatives, the Tetra Tech architect firm, the campus construction company, and individual buildings and leadership teams have been meeting to ensure that we are moving forward in a timely manner. As you all know, we're going to be going out for the vote in May. Since this project is a large project that we're going to be looking at over the course of many years, it behooves us, and the board has approved, to work with the architecture firm early for a design phase for something that could go to state education. If we do have a successful vote, that design phase, we had agreed that we would be focusing on security measures for all of our buildings, along with some work at the high school in terms of athletics, which would include both the stadium and the pool, and then a number of other projects that are probably more health and wellness related, in the sense of a glamorous new septic system at Caroline, right? So there are things like that we get to talk about. Just so that everybody knows, those conversations, there was a lot of targeted work in terms of the planning. We knew that we wanted to look at the security measures of the buildings to build upon the smart bond work or smart schools allocation work that's happening right now, which will be utilizing again that system where we have the badges that open the doors and cameras outside the buildings and intercoms to allow for that traffic flow to sort of be welcomed but also sort of halted in a way. This will add to that measure in that first phase. Dr. Brown will be hosting community conversations, well, the architects there and the construction firms as well. There will be 3 of them at this moment in time, one in November, on November 28th at the Tompkins County Library from 5:30 to 7. There will be one in December, on December 13th at the Southside Community Center from 5:30 to 7, and one in January, on January 17th at Boynton Middle School from 5:30 to 7. Those will be in addition to all the work that we are already doing at PTA meetings, and also with PTA Council, and also with community stakeholder groups, as we either are invited or we happen to be there and we're sharing information.
Can we get those dates out to us tomorrow?
Yes, so there's a flyer that will be going out, and we'll also be making sure that all of the district leadership will have these, and making sure that they know that their communities are welcome to come to these as well. So again, we're looking for that delicate balance of making sure that we listen to the community and know what everybody's thinking, but also realizing that, the bond that we're gonna be going out for over the course of time will only be stretched so far, and we do know that we have a lot of measures that we need to be able to address that are either outlined in our building condition survey or that have come to us already from our stakeholders. So, that balance will work together to sort of drive this capital project and make sure that we're addressing the needs and continuing to look at their buildings, from a comprehensive way as supporting our learning spaces. Great.
Questions about any of this?
So those are the three main community conversations, but we're gonna push out to nearly every PTA, I assume.
Oh, yes.
At the building level, and there's gonna be a schedule of who's gonna be where when. Well, there's 12 at least, right?
Yeah, we should get those on everybody's calendar as
Sure.
well.
Right, because, right, so that's.
So that you've got board people there as well as administration.
Absolutely.
I'm gonna be on a lot on social media, multiple emails, insider, our staff updates, so we're gonna put a blitz out there starting very soon.
Right, the digital footprint's great, but it's the
Person.
person,
Yeah, definitely.
this is a people business, so we have to make sure that we're trying to reach out as much as possible. So good.
You want me to
So-
stay here? Okay.
That was Dr. Brown's update.
That was the update tonight.
Didn't say much, Dr. Brown, but it's okay. So
That
we,
was a great team.
All right, so,
Yeah.
so we're gonna switch now to school district business, correct?
Yes, sir.
We're good, and so we're
Yeah.
going to adopt a budget calendar.
And Ms. Ainsley, may I ask that we table that particular one? We still are working on that budget calendar, so we thought we would have that ready to roll tonight, but we aren't ready to have that. We're gonna send it through finance and then back to the board, hopefully at the next board meeting. So if we could table it. that'd be-
My apologies. I'd like to always get that through finance committee, and I did not do that the last finance committee, so my apologies.
All right.
I was gonna take it on my chin.
That's what I'm here.
Yeah, I was gonna blame Dr.
See how
Brown,
good my
so-
team was, just stand and take a look.
No, really, I wasn't gonna blame Dr. Brown.
Yeah.
So I'm crossing that off.
Most times I get on the way, but
Yeah.
that time you stuck right in there and took
I
it.
would never blame Amanda for it.
I know.
So, so since we're not going to do that, we are going to
Yes.
segue into long-range fiscal
Yes.
planning. Here you go, Dr. Brown.
And thank you for this opportunity, and we want this to be more of a work session feel and a conversation as we talk about our fiscal future and the future of our school district. And we know to meet this vision and mission, which is a very aggressive one, we need to plan very thoughtfully and carefully, as we have been doing, how we utilize our resources. So tonight is about, we're gonna talk about our priorities and some things we see as staff as far as priorities over the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, and some things we see on the horizon. And we're gonna be also forecasting what we see as far as the revenue, expenditures, and some gaps that we foresee. And hopefully near the end, we have some conversations about how to close some of those gaps. We've been here before, and with this board support and the community support, we've closed gaps between our revenue and expenditures several different times in ways that we have been able to maintain programming and, quite frankly, make great strides in meeting this vision and mission. So when we think about long-range fiscal planning priorities, our team and I, we got together, we're going to break it down into 3 particular categories. While we know there are many more things we can put up on the screen, but some things we want to be thinking about, and we must think about as we think about how we're going to allocate resources in the near future and the long-term future. Everything, we are a community that supports our neighborhood schools. We went back and forth about how to call it small, a neighborhood, but we landed on we have a neighborhood school approach to schooling here. That comes at a cost, and that's something our community has decided it values and something we want to pay for. The physical spaces, we know we want to continually modernize our spaces. 8 years ago, we were at this table talking about whether or not we needed to have Wi-Fi in our spaces. And this board was one of the first in our state that put Wi-Fi in every learning space in our community and in our playgrounds and parking lots. We're at that place again where we need to talk about what's going to be the future of a learning space and how we work towards getting there. Our secondary course offerings are something we're very proud of. We're offering, 28 different AP courses, 26 or 28, the last time I counted. 28 different AP courses, a range of elective courses, and smaller class sizes at our secondary and elementary schools. All things, as we've had this conversation here before, things that our community supports and values. When we think about teaching and learning, things that we need to be planning for going forward. Recruitment and retention is one that we talk about often, we need to continue to talk about often. We know that to recruit and retain staff here as some of the best educators in our state and nation, we need to offer a robust professional development opportunities program. There were years ago when we had to make some significant shifts when it came to professional development because of the budget constraints that we have. We've been able to build that budget back up, and we're offering some outstanding professional development, which was resulting in anti-marginalization curriculum, case studies, you name it. Some of the most innovative stuff happening in our state and nation are happening because of our professional development opportunities. And diversity, we've talked often about continuing to diversify our staff. We've put significant resources into HR supports and to the classroom to support recruiting and retaining a diverse workforce. And this last one here, and we're going to talk much more about this as we talk tonight. I'm proposing to our community and to our boards tonight that we are always competitive when it comes to our compensation packages and more specifically our salaries. And I would love for us to be in that top tier. How we define that top tier is something we can talk about. I'm coming from a school district where we said we wanted to be in the top tier of salaries, and that looked like the top 25% when comparing to our market or to our competitors. I want us to be a place that folks say is paying in the top tier when it comes to our competition. And we have some thoughts about how we can get there over the next 3-6 years and how we can stay there. But we need to talk about what that looks like and how we do it. Long-range fiscal planning when it comes to support services. Everything from our buses, our bus routes, which we do much when it comes to buses. We offer multiple routes. We want to have short bus riding times. Our replacement cycle for buses is something that we've thought very carefully about over the years. Maintaining our buildings, our debt service, which we're going to talk about later on as far as how we stabilize that, how we continue to meet that need, and the capital projects, which Amanda just referred to. So those three categories can keep folks up at night, but some things that we need to think about as we plan out how we're going to allocate resources and how, quite frankly, you're going to see how we close some gaps that we're going to have. Now, I know this is way too small. That's why we have everything in board docs for folks who are watching at home, folks in the audience. I hope you can pull up on your devices for the board, and you can pull up on your devices too. And later on, we can probably expand some of these things or not. I have several documents. I'm just going to walk through quickly what documents we have there that are out there for everyone to see. This first document is our general fund and where we've been as far as our total revenue and total expenditures. Let me step back. The numbers that we're putting in front of you tonight they're audited numbers. How many audits do we have every year, Amanda?
We have, well, this is based on the large audit that we submit to the state in every single October.
Right.
So all the blue slides are historical slides, so they're all based on audited numbers.
So, audited numbers. So these numbers are going back 2014. You'll see there. This next slide and document you'll have in there, I feel like I'm flipping through a budget book now, is very specifically the revenue, where our monies have been coming from. Everything from the tax levy to our federal funds, where the different sources of revenue for us and where they have been over the last few years, including where we are right now, to get to that $128 million budget. The other document you have there is just by category. And Amanda, you want to break this down a little bit more because you deal in this world.
Sure. So the opposite, obviously, of the revenue, which Dr. Brown just showed. This is the expenditure report, right? So this is an expenditure report that you can look at. So there's different ways to look at expenditures. The function and object are names that are given by the state. So the different ways that you can look at your budget or your expenditures or your revenues, right, in New York State budgeting and accounting. And so this one is you're looking at all of these items by what is called function. So there's things that fall under general support, and you can see that's sort of like almost like the central administration, anything that would happen here at 400 Lake Street, right?
Keep talking.
Sure, okay. The next one would be sort of like the function would be instruction, right? So that's the one that you take a look at and really sort of see what we have in terms of what we pay for our instructional support services. And so that includes a whole bunch of items, including teacher salary, but also our support staff salaries.
Well, I'm on the right slide now. I'm
Yeah.
trying to do it so I can expand. I can make it bigger for folks later. So.
Okay, so we're going to go, so this is the first slide, so we're going to go two more from here.
And two.
Yeah,
Right.
that's it right there. Yep, and so as you can see, instruction is broken down into those categories, and then there's transportation, and then obviously there's a lot of other expenditures, which includes quite large items, including employee benefits and debt service.
Got it.
Bigger's better.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to play with this now, and then beta form, yeah.
So just like there's a way to look at the budget by function, there's a way to look at the budget by object, right? So object is, if you look at it, it goes from more of a macro, which was the function, to now you're starting to actually look at line items, right? So these would be more of things like salary, and then those are broken down. So the only thing here, you have to remember that this report is generated by state codes, so we don't always categorize things. So it doesn't mean that we don't have teacher pre-K, we have $0. We actually categorize our teacher pre-K as an inter-fund transfer. So you wouldn't actually see it showing up in this salary report. It actually comes from a budget line that is much lower down on that budget. You see the inter-fund transfer at the bottom. So that'll show you what we pay for the pre-K. We don't have half-day K, and then we have categories of K through 6, which is your elementary, but that includes probably the middle school teachers, and then teachers 7 through 12. And then you can look at that, the benefits, and then all the other expenditures are sort of lumped together by object.
And, this one is the revenue, and we're going back.
So now, if you've noticed, we've switched from sort of those blue headers to the orange headers. And so that was to denote, now we're no longer, so imagine if you're standing on a line and we have a 180-degree look, right? So we looked back those 90 degrees, and now we're looking forward for 90 degrees, right? So everything that we've done to this time in terms of the slides have been a look back, where we've come from. We have to honor sort of where we are right now. The 2019 column will be the same as you saw on the blue sides prior, and now we'll be looking forward with some projections.
Can you talk about the assumptions we're making here now?
Sure, so you might want to just scooch it a little bit
Which way?
smaller. Okay,
Smaller.
yep, you can just actually, right there, that's perfect.
Yeah.
So this is a revenue analysis, right? So this is a revenue assumption. So these are no longer audited numbers. We are living in column 2019, right? We're bringing in money day in and day out. And so we are looking at potentially what the revenue change might be over the course of time. So it's okay, I'm gonna just stand up and point.
Please do.
So property taxes, what we did, what we're using here in terms of this system is I'm actually able to sort of project out what the property levy would be. So this is based on going up to the levy every single year moving forward. And so we sort of know what our capital exclusions will be, and we know what our pilots are, and I plug that into a formula, and I can project out over the course of time, right? So as you can see, we expect that, we probably bring in, anywhere just over, 2.5% there moving forward. The other local revenue are usually it's our BOCES rebates, right? That makes up a large part of it, and also a lot of our tuitions that are coming in that are reimbursements for things that we pay, and Medicare dollars that we bring in and things like that. So this is the piece sort of that we know is like the local share of things, right? Taxpayer and then the combination of things that we bring in as revenue from the district. These are the state pieces, right? And so these are the aid numbers that we will be bringing in. You have your basic aid, and then you have all the other state revenue that's coming in as aid. So a lot of these are your formula aid, formula-driven aid, and then you have your expenditure-driven aid. What you spend, you get reimbursements back for, right? And so again, you can see here, we're sort of assuming that we're not changing our operations very much. There's not a lot of other BOCES programs. We can't really change transportation too much. So we're sort of like holding that sort of flat as we move forward. And then there's a 2% increase on the basic aid coming in year after year. We bring in a little bit of federal revenue here and there, and so we'll hold that flat as well. And then the other financing sources, this will look awfully familiar if you look at your budget document, which I know you've all studied. And this is actually the amount of fund balance and reserves that we have allocated to balance our budget. So I'm going to assume that every year we've recouped that money, and then we're going to continue to utilize that to balance our budget as sort of that the what if money, right? The if we need it, the oh my goodness, this boiler blows, oh we had a breakdown on a bus, those sorts of things, right? That's there. So just so you know, as you can see here, we're kind of all those things added together. We kind of make an assumption that we're going up in about a 2% world. Now these can change. We can utilize the system and do some what ifs if we needed to. But right now, those are the assumptions that we're using to generate this dialogue this evening.
And that's been, and we come to that after years of data.
Correct.
And this is the expenditure one.
So this is expenditures, right? So
And let me
go ahead, Dr.
frame it
Brown,
first,
please.
and then explain it. One of the things we are assuming here is, when I talk about being in the top tier and competitive, from our analysis, we think we should be looking at about a 10% increase to salaries over 3 years. That is something we haven't done in a while. That would be aggressive, but we wish if to stay competitive where we want to be in that top tier, we see ourselves needing to do about a 10% increase in salaries over 3 years. Now that's going to have some significant impacts on us if we were to go there. Now, I said 10%. I didn't say 15, and I didn't say 4. And so we're going to map out later what that will look like with the different percentages. But right now we're assuming 10% over 3 years. And Amanda, you want to talk about what that does to our numbers as far as expenditures?
Yep, so again, we already just discussed what we're bringing into the district to sustain the operations. This would be all the things that are going out, right? In terms of payroll, our benefits packages, our equipment pieces, contractual supplies and other, right? So that's all of the work to sustain the operations that we do over the course of time. We have our debt service principal and interest, our interfund transfers, that's for pre-K right there. Now the debt service principal and interest essentially is based on, we know that we're going to be going out for a capital project, but we probably won't be hitting us until later on. So this is actually based on the calendar that we have right now. As soon as we know what those factors will be, we'll be able to input these into our long-range financial planning. And you're going to see that most likely, depending on how we do things, if we get some bands, which are anticipated notes, we might not actually see very much of an impact right away, because we're going to be monitoring that debt service calendar to keep that flat. That's going to be able to keep us to have that levy amount continually moving forward in a predictable way for our tax cap calculation. Okay?
So this is underestimating our assumed debt service over time.
So this is just forward a few years. So right now we know we're not going to accrue any debt, Brad, probably until about this time. At this point in time, yes, we potentially are underestimating. Now debt will fall off, right?
Right.
And we have 1 year. If you look at our debt service calendar, we do have 1 year of a blip. We're going to try to really enhance the payments during that year to keep everything level. That's the goal, is to sort of just keep that predictable moving forward.
That's a key slide. Assuming the kind of compensation increases that I mentioned, 10% over 3 years, which would be aggressive, what it would do to our expenditures. And this next slide here gets, sorry man.
That's good.
All right, this is what it looks like if we were to do that 10% over 3 years, as far as revenue and expenditure analysis. And Amanda, you're going to walk us through this one because we see some red here now, and we haven't seen red for a few years.
So this is essentially what we just did, is we took those two past slides, right? And we just combined them. We transposed the revenue and we transposed the expenditure. We put them in one perspective so that you can see on just one spot, so you don't have to flip pages, what do we bring in based on the assumptions and what will be going out based on the assumptions. The numbers on the bottom, that's surplus or deficit, right? So we're assuming, we made also an assumption that we were going to spend what we brought in 2019. Now, we have been doing really well in terms of trying to end the year to a positive. We've been trying to build some fund balance. We haven't been building as much over the years, but we've definitely been ending the year to a positive. But we assumed a zero. Let's say that we spend what we brought in. We look at the next year, we know what our revenue is, we know what our expenditures are, and we will need to find an additional $1.868 million of revenue to be able to support those operations. That can come from lots of different sources, right? But that would be the difference between what we would need to operate and what it would cost to operate. And it's the same thing then moving forward, right? So as you go through those years, what do we need to operate and what do we bring in and what is the difference? If we were bringing in more revenue than we were outputting in expenditures, you would see that that graph would not actually be hanging below the line or in red, it would be the blue and be above the line on the graph.
This is one of the more important slides here of the evening. All of them important, but this one here, and Amanda, this blue line here is assuming our revenue analysis.
That's right, so that's just, again, another way to look at the revenue. So we transpose that now to a line graph. Some people like numbers, some people like visual. So this is a visual representation of the revenue over the course of time.
And you'll see that top line is if we were looking at a 4% salary increase each year for our employees, 4% each year. 1 year, 4%, 4% the next year, and 4% the next year will be that top line. And you'll see the significant gap we would have between our expected revenue and what we would be expending. That green line is if we're assuming a 3% salary increase across the board for everyone. This orange line is a 2% is where we have been. And that yellow line is what I was proposing earlier. It's like if meeting our priorities and meeting our goals, we would be increasing salaries 10% over 3 years. And I know that folks at home probably saying, so you're saying two very different things. You want to increase salaries, but you're showing revenue projections that don't look like you can do any of that. Therein lies why we are 6,000 plus thinkers, because what we're proposing is we're going to talk about some things we've done in the past when we've called that the lines are separated. What did we call it last time? We had a term, you coined that
Lines
term.
have crossed.
The lines have crossed. We're getting to a place now where our lines are going to cross again, and that the lines are going to cross again next year if we do nothing. And if we increase salaries, they will cross even quicker, or it'll be a bigger gap. Last time we had this, what did we do? In 2014, it was the last time we had this conversation with our lines of crossing. And that year was the year we tax cap override. That was the term. Overrode, override. What's the name, Moira?
It would be we, past tense, overrode the tax cap.
So you had to think about it, so I don't feel so
Really
bad.
weird.
It never sounds good to me. Well, it doesn't sound good ever anyway, but that was what we did in 2014. We did that override. We looked at our instructional programs. We did an evaluation, and there were some programs that we didn't do in 2015 and 2016. Some programs we stopped doing, which resulted in some staffing shifts and some other things. So we did an evaluation of our instructional programming, and we made some reductions there. We did vacancy and expenditure control. As we had openings, we had a process in place where we didn't fill any positions unless they were absolutely necessary. I believe we started that process in October of that year. We did it for about a year. Vacancy and expenditure control. I mean, we didn't purchase furniture for a few years. We had no professional development. So we did some things that we don't like to do. And then we use fund balance. And there's another chart in there that speaks to how we've used fund balance over the years and how we've most recently tried to build that back up. I think at one point we were down to about $8 million in fund balance, Brad, which is not a good place to be for a district with a $120+ million budget. And that also affects our bond rating as well. So as we're talking about going out for a capital project, we want our bond rating to be as high as it can be. Getting your fund balance that low, from what I've learned in this role, is not a good thing. So we use fund balance in those years. At 1 year, around $6 or $7 million of it. So that's what we did in 2014. What we know we need to be thinking about. Obviously, we need to increase revenue. That is a fact. Whether we're at in a 2% salary compensation increase or the 10% is where I want us to be. We're going to need to figure out some ways to increase revenue. Our community is going to need to figure out some ways for this organization to increase revenue. Some ways to do that. And this is not a recommendation tonight. This is just what school districts in our situation do. Utility tax. We've had some conversations in the past about a utility tax. Something that, if I'm not mistaken, we're the only small city school district in the state that is not using a utility tax at this point.
56 out of 57 do it.
56 out of 57 school districts in our state have a utility tax, and we can talk about that later, about what that means and what that is. Something that we should think about, or could think about. We could look at overriding the tax cap again. And one of the things, Amanda, she put together a chart. I didn't put it up there because it would have blown your mind. But we have, if we were to assume this a flat tax rate, or what did you call it, freezing the tax rate, Amanda? Which we are right now at a 17 cent.
We are just dipped below $17, so we are at 16.9996. So
Yeah, so our
it's
tax rate has
quite
gone down over the years.
Correct.
If we were to keep it, freeze it, what would that look like as far as a tax cap? What kind of impact would that mean on a tax cap?
Correct. So you, instead of utilizing the tax cap calculation to calculate your levy, which you then look at your assessed value and figure out your rate, we were talking about potentially reversing that formula and saying, if you know what you want your tax rate to be, right, and then you worked with your county assessor's office to find out what your taxable value is, and then you were to be able to look at what your levy would be versus your tax rate would be. It's a different way to think of things.
And it's higher, it's a higher number than what our calculated tax cap is.
Correct, right.
Right,
Yeah.
But then you have to.
You exceeding the tax levy limit every year.
You are exceeding the tax levy limit every year.
So that's overriding.
That's
Whether you
override.
overrode it or override it.
It's-
In
That's
the
right.
future, you would have to override it every
you
year.
have to-
That is correct,
you
and
have
that
to-
requires, that's where that vote on, just instead of a simple majority, right, you need to have a super majority, which is the 60% vote.
I thought it's even higher.
No, they did
Going
say-
forward. Seems like that.
60%.
They kept it at
Still,
60. They kept it
oh,
at
okay.
that. We thought it was, and we looked,
Okay.
we did the research and that was not. They were making some adjustment with the star rebate, which is something to consider, but not with the actual voting number.
I actually had a couple of questions about the tax cap override because I recall, and I'm not a tax person or a finance person, as everyone here knows, policy person, that in the wake of that 2014 tax cap override, Andrew Cuomo changed, added some additional tax consequences that would fall upon communities
Right.
that override the tax cap, which includes losing the star exemption, which includes losing the tax rebate that we get, so that tax cap override would have very serious fiscal consequences to every single homeowner. That would be in addition to the higher tax rate the higher tax rate they would have, that households would be losing hundreds of dollars to a number of hundreds of dollars per household every year, and that would be extremely painful, extremely.
Again, we're just offering up to.
I'm just
the
gonna
different
speak out on
options.
that
It's
now.
not a recommendation. And we would not be recommending a tax rate increase if we were doing that. We would be looking to freeze the tax rate and back into the levy, which could give us some flexibility there. Yeah, and we're looking at the law now, it continues to change. Those consequences associated with overriding the tax cap seem like they change each year to make it more punitive. So we would have all that information for you if we were moving forward with that, which we aren't saying we're doing. We're just talking about the different options.
Is this a discussion part, Dr.
Yeah,
Brown? Or-
After when I'm done here, well, we're at the discussion part now, you're right. Because the last one was just utilization of fund balance, which we've done before. And we're back up to 18 million now, 18 million, which is,
Less than it was when the budget was much smaller, we were
Yeah.
about 23.
You know, we were about 23, the budget at that time was about 108 million.
Okay.
And then the fiscal crisis occurred.
we needed it.
Did we use them?
So, Maura, go ahead. Sure, sorry.
Well, I just noticed we kind of jumped over the instructional program
Oh,
evaluation
yeah.
reduction.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, which is what we did the last time. We could look at our program again and see where we can, should, or could make some reductions, which typically results in fewer staff members. That's just because most of our budget, 80+% of it is in people. So a shift to instructional programming looks like fewer people.
Well, I will only venture just, it's always going to look at projections. There are linear projections and a non-linear world. So we don't, is there going to be more construction, that there's no tax abatements? Is there going to be more revenue coming in? You know, when we're looking at revenue in the community, is there does that affect us dramatically? It certainly has supported what we do over the last few years. But still, there's a tax levy limit. State aid from the state is a diminishing portion of our budget. Brad,
Oh, yeah.
I saw it.
It's down a good 5-6% of our budget from where it was before the fiscal crisis.
Right, you can see there's not going to be a spike, and our newly elected governor really doesn't like to throw money our way anyway, and so
No,
we're right in the spot where,
I mean, that's why we did the tax cap override, was to basically make up for what the state had withdrawn and has never come back with,
and it will never come back.
and never will.
It'll never
So-
come back. So we're looking at this is discussion part, but, so I'm saying projections are, our revenue goes up approximately, in that 2% world.
Right.
And I see expenditures go up, 3.8 or exceeding that, and law of large numbers, so that negative gets bigger and bigger.
Mhm.
So,
Make a shift.
so how do, and we're gonna go negative numbers regardless of, if we said again that we're in a 2% world, we're still gonna go negative.
Yeah, we could freeze salary and then still go negative. So we have to have a hard conversation no matter what. It's just how hard is this conversation going to be? And I recognize I'm also saying we want to give some unprecedented compensation increases right now. Not unprecedented, but we haven't done compensation increases that we haven't done. Definitely in my tenure. We've been in that 2% world for the most part.
Well, the degree to which we've been in a 2% world, as long as there's a tax cap, that even with all the new construction in town, that we still have the same constraint.
Well, and in
Increase the
part,
tax
that's
base.
because the rest of upstate New York does not have that construction, and all districts in New York State are facing this problem. One thing that I would just want to point out to our public having to do with our budget is what a tiny proportion of our income comes from New York State. What's the percentage? It's in the 20s. State aid is 20s. And
that's where the reimbursement aids included. The actual
Right.
flat out state aid, not the reimbursement aids, is down to 15% of our budget.
And all of our surrounding districts get between 70 and 90% of their entire operating budget from the state, as in it doesn't come from their tax basis, which is a very, very different situation for taxpayers in these other districts, when they'll talk, well, we're gonna do this, and we'll have to raise, we'll have to raise 16 cents on every dollar that we pay, and I would sit there and say, okay, well, we have to raise 73 cents on every dollar that we pay. Yes, we have a healthier economy and more things to tax, but it is a burden on a lot of people.
We missed out on Amazon coming here, so.
Darn, they went to Northern Virginia instead.
And Long Island said, right? Can I just ask, Amanda, part of this was the capital improvements and, another bond issue. You touched on what happens to our debt service and the tax levy limit and all that. One of your thoughts and
One of our
finance.
objectives is to
If you
keep
can
debt
get into that a
service-
little bit.
Sure, the objective is to try and keep debt service relatively level over the course of 10 years going out, so that it doesn't impact this, doesn't impact the levy. It's confusing to people if it goes down one year and then it jumps up $3 million the next year, and it's an exception to the tax cap. So then you're having to explain to people why their taxes went down one year and jumped up 4.5% the next year, and it's still just a majority vote. You don't have to override the tax cap. So it becomes very difficult on the public if you allow your debt service to fluctuate. So our objective is to try and make the debt service flat. That's why we're talking about going to a bond issue to keep up our buildings, but we're not gonna borrow all the money in a single year. We're looking at doing it over the period of, 6, 7, 8 years, so that we can keep our debt service, as we pay off, we borrow more, keep it relatively level over time, is the objective, so that we don't have a dip down, and we don't have a jump up. And those are, hard to explain to people how, well, what do you mean, you lowered my tax rate last year, and now it's going up 4.5% or 5.5% this year, and it's within the cap, but it's a 2% cap, how can that be? Well, that service is an exemption from it, and so we want to avoid that issue. So our objective is to try and be level. I mean, I understand it's gonna fluctuate a little, but to be as close to level as possible, so that it doesn't enter into our conversations each year. It's just a number, it's roughly where it is every year, and doesn't enter into our changing of the levy.
And there's certainly a fair amount of the work, building condition surveys, a fair amount of work needs to be done anyway. Obviously, there's the initiatives regarding building entrances and multiple.
I mean, the building safety is the first priority right now, but as you point out, is maintenance. Buildings do get a day older every day, and we've got to maintain them, no different than people have to maintain their homes. We have to keep them up. I know it's surprising to people that 6,000 children are rough on real estate, and there's maintenance involved in that. And so that has to continue, and then there's, to the extent that teaching and learning is changing, some of those spaces need to change.
There's building aid too. Pat, as you mentioned, there's a lot of districts that get very high building aid. We get about 58 cents on the dollar coming back. That building aid, when I showed you the state factors in terms of our revenue, that's actually part of that. We get that money back to reimburse the work that we did. So in the long term, if aid is not returning to the district, that would be for future boards potentially to worry about, but still, you wouldn't wanna leave future boards in that situation where you're not bringing in that revenue at that level
Right.
consistently as well.
Well, as we all
There's a
know,
double
there's been
bang.
conversation in the last couple of years about the aid formula, what changes might be made, and the state has ignored it to a great degree. I don't think we've done anything to really look at it. We're aware that the state senate has changed over from Republican hands to Democratic hands. I have no idea what that's going to mean, whether the conversation now will move towards some sort of a change in the aid formula or not. I have no real idea where they may head with that. Would they favor foundation aid over reimbursement aids, make some changes there? I don't know where they may be headed in that regard, but it'll be different. The conversation will be different at the legislature this year.
There'll still be 3 people in the room. The governor is one of them, and he's has his sights on other things.
Other offices?
I believe.
Well,
So-
he wrote the perfect tax cap. As you know, they've been very reluctant to make any
Any
changes
changes,
to the
right.
tax cap because it was drafted in perfection the first time around.
And if you overrode it, he didn't like it, and so they
Yeah.
made other changes to make it harder to override, because, and you state.
So when we look at
Chris,
the
go.
utility tax, which we've discussed a few times, and it's a sliding level of,
You can pick a
you can pick a level of it per year,
4%.
up to 4%. But
And
it's,
I think you gotta do it in 1/2 increments or something.
We would have to look at the law again, because when we researched it, that was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And so we just wanna make sure that there was no changes to that, but at that time, it was by 0.5%
I think it was 1/2%.
increments.
So you could decide to do it at 1% or
Right.
1.5 or something, and then you wouldn't have to be at 4.
yeah, but still, even if we went to the 4, that's not eating up the whole
Oh, no.
gap that we're looking at. So
No,
I just
no.
wanna put it out there so that everyone's aware.
It would,
It's-
it
it's
would
an-
be of some assistance, but it wouldn't,
Yes.
it wouldn't make up, well, I mean, look, they've got a projection out there. How many years out is that? Just 5 years? You know, with a $13 million gap, my recollection on the utility tax was it was hundreds of thousands at 4%. It was
We
not.
might, that was difficult to tell, so I think we crossed the million threshold of the
I thought it
4%.
It's not gonna make up for
Right.
it, James.
No, because I don't know, I think we were looking at like a 2% option, so again, we'd have to really bring that back,
Bring
if
it
that's
back.
something we
If
wanna
people
look at,
wanna talk about it.
yeah.
So you're gonna tax my smartphone so I don't have to use it anymore?
Only
Yes.
yours now.
Yes.
Uh,
Well, I'll just remind the public hearing that we had, where we did get a number of people coming, every single one of them speaking out against the utility tax,
Correct.
which was a tiny amount of money attached to those bills. The message that everyone sent was, we are overtaxed, we are overtaxed. We're overtaxed in New York State, and if you're gonna get that kind of talk about a very small utility tax, you have to project that in a much larger magnitude if you're talking about overriding a tax cap with a supermajority year after year after year. I don't see that as a feasible option.
No.
Utility tax is regressive.
Right.
But we're making no decisions.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we wanted to make sure we did take from tonight was just, here's some facts from our perspective. We have audited numbers from a third-party auditor, and we have projections based on a significant amount of data. So we've taken the audit report and we're making some projections. If there's different thinking on what we're putting out here, we want to hear that. I mean, we have leaders in the room, folks, we have students, we have some of our school district leaders. So folks have questions about the number. We need to, as a community, we need to agree on the numbers. So then, as a community, we can talk about what we do next. Again, this is going to be a challenge for us as we move forward, particularly around how to compensate our employees to maintain competitiveness and to recruit and retain. That is something everyone wants to do. Now, to do that, we're going to have to work together and think through how we close this gap. But we can't get to that conversation until folks agree and understand. And we try our best to say this as clear, because you sit in those audit meetings and it seems like only two people understand what the hell we're talking about. But two people understand. Most folks are like, this is not making much sense. But we're trying to make sense of it for everyone, by using these kind of charts and data. So I guess, yeah.
So the dotted line on the bottom is basically what we can do within the tax cap.
Correct.
Yes, and so, and that is what is in place with New York State law providing for an override.
That's the assumption for that blue dotted
Right.
line on the bottom.
And we are, I agree with your interest, and I have for years, in raising salaries for teachers. I've been, I think, pretty vocal about starting salaries and how low they are relative to other districts. Well, they're still, they're,
We went up 11%. When you
They-
said we
they're-
hadn't gone up, we
No,
just
they
went
have-
up 11.
they have gone up, but there are some smaller districts around here who can be pretty generous with starting salaries. Now, they front loaded a little bit more, and there are not a lot of jobs, and also I'm not actually sure how that balances with workloads, because I also know teachers in those districts who are doing 6 preps a day for slightly higher salaries. So I mean, you're not comparing the straight thing, but yes, I agree with your goal. I'm just I don't think that the way out of it is to promote exceeding the tax cap every year, not with the current law. I don't think it's realistic to say that the voters are gonna turn around and give us huge amounts of money, because I hear from a lot of them. And they're all pro-education, but they also wanna keep their houses.
Other questions, reactions, anyone in the audience about the numbers and the information we've shared? Again, this is why we do year-round budgeting. These conversations are going to happen in every meeting now. But questions about this baseline? Thanks for coming, Brad, Adam, and representing tonight.
Amanda, what are some ways in which
revenue over the years?
There's not a lot of creativity except for the ones that we really gave you. I mean, you can utilize your fund balance, but you have to have that plan at some point in time turn around and recoup it, right? So the state comptroller, you know, even the bond rating folks, right? If the board were to come forward and say, look, you know, we're figuring this out, we're doing some long range planning, in the next year or two, we plan to utilize fund balance to sustain the operations in this manner, we will not dip below this amount, right? And then our plan is to, you know, that will give us the time to be able to turn this around. The other thing is expenditures, right? So we did a lot of work on expenditures, and there was a lot of conversation, and those expenditures were really related to the way that we were funding benefit packages. And there was a lot of staff, colleagues, who we all, you know, that's the one thing we all share as colleagues. If you take the health insurance, we're all members of the health, you know, initiative. And we did a lot of work on analyzing that and what we could do. You know, program evaluation, that gets very emotional for a lot of schools when they have to start to look at program and evaluate that and say, okay, what either is not getting us to where we need to be, but we've always been doing it, right? What things need to change, could we do them in a more effective way? Because oftentimes the answer is it's with fewer people, but right, you're stronger and mightier, but you're fewer. And so they're all really, there's not a lot of conversations we can have that aren't gonna be emotionally based right now. Just like Pat said, right, even the utility tax brought out emotion of small business owners. If I remember correctly, that was a lot of folks that showed up, right? Like, we're taxed enough, it's really hard to start a small business here in New York. And now you're going to add this to us. And that was more, we heard more from the small business owner than we did probably from just the general taxpayer. I don't think the state's gonna turn around. I just don't, and I don't think, I think right, like, I would love to say that as things change politically, right, there's a mindfulness about the value of education. I'll tell you, even if there was, it's probably gonna go to downstate. That's what the trends are telling us when we go to all of the business officials meeting. So, you know, I'm always up, everybody in this room knows, I'm up for the meetings, I'm up for the dialogue, we're up for the analysis. We can take these charts as a starting point and try to put in factors and see what that does, right? These are fluid graphs. They happen to be static tonight, but when we download them and we work together in a work session, we could make them fluid. And then we have to analyze that, right? Not only on the impact of the amount of money that it generates, but then the impact politically, compassionately, right, professionally, on what that does to our organization and getting us to our goals.
So I think she said we have a better opportunity cutting expenditures than raising revenue to an impact on that level.
It's a simple world. Either we look at what we spend and we decrease it, or we look at what we bring in and we increase it. I have always joked, I have a 14-year-old daughter, we all know, she could probably look and balance the budget for next year. It's really easy to get to next year. The difficulty is the 3 years out, the 5 years out, right? And so I think we've always been, the 5 years I've been here and the 10 years before that when I worked as a consultant at the district through BOCES, I think there always has to be the conversation about sustainability and impact to your vision and your mission, right? So that's about program.
We did,
And it doesn't mean you have to cut the program, it just means maybe it's a different way of thinking about it.
we did a demographic study, correct, for
Yes.
finance and facilities. So we're really looking at a fairly, a healthy but static student body. You know, many districts in our area, their student numbers are going down, schools getting under,
Right.
small, getting smaller and smaller.
2 and 3% smaller a year.
Right.
So,
So I'm sure we have folks working in the community, and I can probably certainly relate. you know, okay, $135 million for the same, that's a lot of resources. So we support you, but you're gonna have to allocate those resources, and, you know, that's a lot for that many kids, right? So that's part of the conversations we'll have to have is, you know, obviously what's the highest, best use? Not like natural resources 100, Brad? Is
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Highest
right.
and best use, right? I remember something from Cornell, thank you. But we are saying in New York City, certainly the announcement today that Amazon chose Long Island City, chose New York City for one of the new headquarters, another 50,000 jobs. Google is doubling their workforce in New York City, going up to 12,000. They're adding a lot of jobs in New York City. Certainly that's great for revenues coming into the state, but that's once again making downstate even more top-heavy than it is right now. And for a long time, the revenues from Wall Street was feeding the state revenue, all those cash bonuses that Brad and I would keep giving those cash bonuses because they were taxing right now and go would feed our budgets, and then that kind of went away. But there's a lot of jobs coming into New York State. New York State was a winner, basically, over the last few days, and certainly New York City and Cornell, yes, with the tech campus on Roosevelt Island. We have connections there, but that revenue, and so that focus is going to be downstate. So where are these kids going to go to school? I mean, these are families going to come in. They don't already all live here, so it's going to be attracting talent to New York State, which is great. But the focus is going to be there and not in state. So I think that's another thing that we're grappling with. We're connected in some ways, but the benefits are, there's going to be a big focus on what in the world we're going to do with all these new jobs and the demands down there, infrastructure, et cetera.
She has a question. When you're talking about 10% salary increases and being competitive, I heard Dr. Brown say across the board, and then I heard somebody really just say teachers. Are you talking about bus drivers and
we're assuming for all employees.
and that's also means going up into board administration positions? Same
Yeah,
thing?
all employees. That's how we did the projections. We didn't pull out any particular group. We just took out salary lines and just projected them 10% increases over 3 years.
Just linear, right, which is.
Again, this is not negotiating in public. It's not
I-
talking about
I-
any particular group, and that could all vary.
It's
But
the liaison in me,
Yeah.
I just
yeah.
want it out there.
Amanda, I have one question, it's got a slightly different question. Mandates, state mandates. So every year, another mandate gets, created in Albany that then becomes something that we have to do at the local level, whether there's extra administrative or extra record keeping is there anywhere that one would have a sense of the cost of a that we calculate in X amount of mandates, new mandates, what those costs of those mandates are over time? I'm thinking that building one that was just created.
Sure,
I mean, that's staff time, right?
absolutely,
So
absolutely.
what impact does that
Staff
have?
time and software.
We haven't quantified it.
We haven't quantified it. There are lists all over, especially, on the listservs. These are like what business officials love to write about, just behind Albany, right, itself. But the unfunded mandate, right, and what that does to us. I mean, I just went to a business officials retreat, and you guys went to a training soon after that, and we were, I think, chatting
Yep.
right at the exact
Yep.
same time about ESSA, right? And what that's going to do, I can just tell you, the business office alone, Angela Jordan and I, and Lynn, right, in that 3 little offices right there, that's just gonna add a tremendous amount of work to our jobs, because of the tracking and the reporting and getting those to this portal and that portal and making sure that that's all in a timely manner. And there's always the threat that if you don't do it well, or you don't do it by deadline, or you don't, right, they're gonna withhold your state aid. So we're lucky it's only 25% of our budget, but still, it's gonna hurt, right? And so those are all things that they sort of utilize to say, okay, you don't have to, there's some quality controls, and we're not the type of district that say, well, we'll just do it, we don't care if we do it well, right? So that's the other piece to it too. I mean, we spend a lot of time on data, we look at those things, we try to utilize those mandates in a positive way, but some of them are getting a little more difficult to spin to the positive because there are just so many now that are tipping the scales to the unfunded zone. That, you know, we are essentially having to hire new people. Even if we did a program evaluation, it's like, who's gonna be able to check these boxes? Because the state tells us that we have to. And that requires people to do that. Because there's not always technology to fill in for the people.
Oh, no,
Right.
it's still got, I assume WinCap will have an update to their software, we'll have to pay for that.
Sure.
In order to do it. The feds want building level data under ESSA on a retrospective basis. But the state, in state law, the budget decided that we'd like building level data too, but we won't use the federal data, we want it on a prospective basis.
Right.
So you're gonna be doing both.
Right, that 180 horizon,
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
like that's exactly what we'll be
You're
doing.
gonna do both.
Reporting backward and forward.
So the state doubled down on a unfunded mandate from the feds. They doubled it, very helpful. And neither of our legislators, so people know, neither of our legislators knew they'd voted for it. They both did.
They both got reelected.
And they both got reelected, yeah, but they both voted for it.
That's encouraging. So, about,
Is this where you thought the conversation was
Yeah,
going to go next time? Just,
I-
you know, it's
want to comment, we have a team of thinkers at this table and beyond that can figure this out. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I don't want this to be a doom and gloom kind of, we have work to do, yes. We've been here before, and we are here to solve problems and take on challenges. So I'm looking forward to the conversation with a lot of folks, and Amanda is too. I'm sure. Look at that smile. Can't wait.
Anything else for Amanda? Is it guy, anything? Or good? All right. Are we good?
I'm good on that one, yeah.
Okay, all right.
More to come.
Well, thanks, Amanda. Thanks for the in-depth.
Yeah.
Definitely. We just have a few policies to deal with, and I'll hand off to whoever on policy Ann wants to know.
That has to go.
I want it to go.
John's not here. And so,
Everybody gets
okay, so we are looking at policy 6160, superintendent's discretionary fund for first reading and deletion.
So I take it this is our first attempt at cutting costs, and we're gonna start right now, right?
Good timing.
And this is fairly unique, but we'll need, it's a deletion, we're gonna, because we want some deleted.
Yes, that's
Right,
what.
but we don't have such a thing. It's
What?
discretionary fund.
Yes, I believe we don't know whether there's any money in it.
There's no money.
There's no, okay.
But there's a policy,
It used to be.
you moved it.
Yes, I am moving, policy, that number again, 6160, superintendent's discretionary fund for first reading and deletion.
Second by Brett, now go, now we can.
Well, I'll just say that, what I understood about this is that the superintendent doesn't need it, doesn't want it.
I don't want it.
It's not like,
It has been there before. My first couple of years, there were some funds there, and I didn't, you know, it's not good auditing. It's not, the auditors saying we should probably get it.
that's right, thank you for reminding me of that, yes, the auditor suggested that we get rid of this.
It's a little, a gray area that doesn't need to be,
Yes.
even have a color to it, right?
Yeah.
So we'll just,
Folks, I think I'm giving it in the salary, like Bob was moving too early.
Yes, I missed that.
I'll have to ask you what I just missed.
So we're good? So we're gonna get rid of it, right?
Yeah, that's,
Without,
that's the motion.
all right, so I don't know that we need to dwell on it, so all in favor? That's, one thing we can take away from Dr. Brown, all right?
Yeah.
It's always a good day, so I'm really happy. Oh, but there's another policy?
There's another policy,
Oh.
and it's very long. But, so I will move policy number 6700 purchasing for first reading and adoption. And this too, I think there were some revisions based on the auditor's
I'll second.
recommendations.
Second by
And the
Brad.
answer is yes,
Yeah.
not our auditors, this was from the state auditors.
Okay.
Made some comments, and so you added some language, now I'm not gonna remember which.
It has to do
paragraphs were
with
added.
expenditures between X amount of dollars and X amount of dollars.
We had to be added.
Yeah.
Right. There's a lot of words.
There's a lot of words.
So I'm not-
Policy went over it though, right?
Yes, policy went over it, and so.
It is first reading, so there will be a second.
First reading and adoption,
Is that what it said?
yes.
Yeah, we want.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Wow, so you're just,
We're just barreling through.
you're really going,
We don't have a
off,
super, we don't have a super majority here.
yeah.
Oh, we can't, okay.
Only a
We-
super-
But we can do that with a deletion? We just did
No, that was the
deletion.
first read.
It was first reading and deletion.
No,
We can't.
you got, was Pat still here?
No.
No, so, no, you gotta.
Okay, so it, these
So this is
can,
the first
oh,
reading.
we have to come back.
So it's
to
a first reading.
First
We
reading,
can-
right.
We can pass a first reading.
So-
Right, okay.
What's the super majority?
6 or 7.
Simple majority for a first reading.
But
So if you wanted to do a first reading and done, only reading, you have to have a super majority.
which is how many?
It's, I think it's
Six or seven, I don't know.
We wouldn't do
You
six.
tell me.
We can look that up. I thought-
It's a lot longer.
I may be wrong, but I thought.
Oh, we don't have
Yeah.
six anyway.
Yeah, we have six.
Oh, we have
It's
six. Oh,
Is
if
it
it's six?
Well, that's a super
Somebody
majority.
Google this?
I'm pretty sure it's six.
Is there a student around that can look this up?
We got everybody opening up their computer, like, who's gonna look?
I thought,
Emily's on it,
I
right?
thought 2/3 was a major, a super.
I thought so too. I would never bet against Brad, but.
Right, well, Emily, I think is
So
going
neither
to
of
check.
our policy gurus in here.
Well, if we just
Yeah.
give it a minute, we may be able to get rid of 2 policies. So,
Vamp for a minute.
yeah, talk amongst yourself. I'll give you a topic. That's a little Saturday Night Live
Yeah.
gag.
My computer just died. Who's about to give me the answer?
Supermajority is the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's one I do remember from Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
What was that?
But the Holy Roman Empire, it was neither holy or Roman. Sex. I'm just-
Nobody else? Working device that can get this
Emily
answer?
went to, I think she went to get the law book.
Yeah, wait, what was this
School
the
law.
definition of super?
Well, I just typed in Google,
But it isn't just-
nine-member school board, supermajority. And it looked like it was about to give me an answer.
But then it kills your
When
computer.
it killed my computer. The policy?
No, no,
Oh,
you were looking up this.
no, I did, it just flashed.
School law.
No, it's not school, that's
Our own, oh,
About doing a single reading, that's.
oh, that's us.
That's us.
Oh,
That's not a school law.
So it's in our,
it's in
That's
our
a
policy.
This, yeah.
all right, so we need to check our.
So it's a policy on adopted policy.
Policy adoption of revision 2410,
2410.
2/3 vote.
2/3, so 6 out.
Six, okay.
Here we go, team.
Somebody.
So we haven't yet voted on the
We have to vote.
purchasing.
All right,
We voted on the other one.
there we go.
And we're good on the first deletion, and we're gonna go for adoption of
Adoption.
all these words
Okay,
right now.
right.
Okay, and Brad, you seconded, correct?
Yes, I did.
I mean, again, just for Trish's sake,
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure we're clear. All right, so first reading and adoption of 6,700, all in favor? That's everyone, and we have a super duper majority. So, and Brad and Chris are still looking up stuff. Anything else, Dr. Brown? Any other discussion items? Have we,
We've had a lot tonight.
have we given students enough to writing lots over there? It's impressive.
It's a cool choice.
It's impressive. That's,
I don't think we all, or Chris got glasses on, so it's not good.
some folks have small children to get home to. Are we good? Oh, no, be honest. I have a cat to get home to. Jethro is very important. So, are we good, Chris?
We're good.
All right. So Brett, we're good, everyone?
Meetings.
Dates to remember?
We've got a town hall next Tuesday at 5:00. Facilities and finance is pushed back to 6.
The town hall meeting?
On health insurance, retiree health insurance.
Oh, okay, all right.
That's gonna be at 5.
And where is
Facilities and finance is
that going
pushed
to be
back to
held in
6.
this room?
Yeah,
And that's the
that's the 20th.
20th. Okay.
Following week, we have,
You got a regular voting?
oh, the 27th. Oh, 27th, we have a regular. Right. On December 4th.
Yeah.
All right, so we will see folks before Thanksgiving, correct? On Tuesday, right?
Tuesday, the town hall at 5:00, and then stay for finance and facilities.
Actually, it is, there's a lot going on. We have to cover in finance and facilities, so those are important meetings. The other dates, and Dr. Brown, you will give,
I'll shoot some more.
Emily's gonna shoot out some more dates to us.
Community conversations,
Some of the community conversations and some other dates, right?
When we go to PTA meeting.
Right, exactly. So, full schedule. So,
Busy time.
without objection, I believe we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Yeah, wait.
Back to the stuff.